Hello, I'm Stella O'Brien. Accessibility is fragile. Even a simple interaction with healthcare tends to involve a chain of events for which every part has to succeed because the failure of a single link increases the risk of exclusion. I'm deaf. I've largely given up trying to engage with NHS services for my own needs because many services are designed in a way that prevents me from using them. My NHS portal doesn't allow me to make online bookings for GP appointments. You can only book an appointment by phoning, and the success of that then depends upon being able to take a triage phone call at any time over the next 48 hours. Even when I specify that the call must be via Relay UK, which would caption the call for me, this has never happened. And my GP practice refuses to communicate with me via email or text. I have caring responsibilities for a range of family members, but I'm increasingly questioning whether or not this is safe for them. Sometimes I accompany a family member and explain to healthcare staff that I'm deaf and what would help us to communicate with each other. All too often, this means that someone turns to my family member and asks, "Can't you read?" Recently, a family member wanted me to be present for an online discussion with a screening practitioner. He knew that I have a better knowledge of the family's medical history and would make notes of what he needed to do to prepare for the upcoming colonoscopy. That trust has an excellent reputation for accessibility, so I advised him to phone up in advance and check that they'd turn on the closed captions for me. The trust said they'd get back to him if they couldn't, but on the day, there were no captions. The practitioner was so strongly backlit by a large window, I couldn't lip read him. He moved his position to try and help me, but it was still unsettling. On the day of the colonoscopy, my family member was sedated and needed someone to collect him and stay with him afterwards. He asked the staff to make sure that they texted me when he was in recovery so I'd know when I could come and collect him. They placed 2 missed voice calls. I had to guess that he was ready from that. 2 weeks later, he needed a follow-up procedure and experienced some unfortunate complications. Again, nobody texted, and it was a missed no-caller ID call that indicated he was in the recovery room. I waited, but nobody told me what was happening. I could see other people collecting their loved ones and being taken into a side room for a talk about the results, but nobody spoke to me. Eventually, nobody else was left, and most of the staff had gone home. My family member texted me that he was delayed because his blood pressure and heart rate were low. I was taken aback. I found a staff member and insisted I should be taken back to see him. And it was only when I pointed out his change of colour, his low body temperature and cardiac symptoms that the staff acted on how unwell he was. This is a potential patient safety issue. At best, he'd been uncomfortable for longer than necessary because I'd been unable to be an effective advocate for him. But the responsibility for that is largely with a system that isn't set up to consider me as a useful resource. Now, some individual HCPs are outstanding. The people who look after some family members know how to position themselves to talk to me during an appointment. They'll book a time slot for a video call with me so they can use the inbuilt captioning features, and they'll put important items like drug names and their dosages in the chat, so I'm not just relying on the accuracy of the captions. It shouldn't be down to individuals. One way the NHS could address accessibility requirements is to provide resources to implement the existing standards and recommendations. The NHS has relaunched the Accessible Information Standard that has been in place since 2016, but it's neither well known nor widely implemented. After a successful pilot, the NHS is now scaling up the reasonable adjustments flag system that is meant to ensure that key information, such as communication requirements, are shared consistently across the NHS with patient consent. It's meant to support patients and carers to feel less stressed by informing them of adjustments to services. It can help to reduce stress, both for the patient and for those treating them. I'd like to think this relaunch will be more successful this time if there are adequate resources to support it. One thing I would recommend is to lower the barriers to participating in healthcare and recognise that whether I'm a patient or a carer, I'm a resource, not an overhead. Listen to patients and advocates when we tell you what we need to work together successfully with you, because it not only helps us to self-manage our own healthcare, but it meets the policy demands for shifting healthcare into virtual wards, the community and the home.